In today's day and age of the endless number of options in streaming services, finding the perfect movie to watch can feel like a chore at times, and you start to get annoyed. Streaming services offer vast and sometimes overly complicated libraries filled with films and television shows to watch. Whether you are in the mood for a heartwarming comedy or an action-packed adventure film, discovering the right film can just become endless, and at that point, you don't care what you watch. However, today, I found a film that I had completely forgotten existed. It's a little thriller called Unhinged, starring the great Russell Crowe. I knew what the general premise of this film was years ago, but I didn't know what to expect as I came in to watch it, and I absolutely loved what I watched. And for that, I have to thank Netflix for reminding me that this movie did exist in the first place in bringing it to my viewing pleasure. In this video, I'm going to break down why this movie is such a blast in a way that is almost of the guilty pleasure nature that I love in many movies that I've seen before. For those watching this video, comment down below if you came across a film that has now become one of your recent favorites thanks to the streaming service that it was on when you didn't know it was there before. Unhinged follows Rachel, a single mother whose bad day gets even worse when she gets involved in a road rage incident with a driver during rush hour traffic. She realizes that the man she got in the fight with is now starting to follow her and stalk her along with her family. The initial road rage incident escalates with even bigger stakes to where this man, played by Russell Crowe, is now terrorizing Rachel in the worst ways possible. Now, that is the general premise of the movie. But in a way, it also explores much more than just this one incident in a way that gives light to an aspect of society almost all people can relate to in some ways. Everyone here knows what the feeling is like to have been in a road rage incident. Whether it was a small incident of people cursing each other out because one person did the wrong thing, or if it's actually a case where people get physical and violence ensues. The movie is in essence making light of that by exploring the themes of road rage, the consequences of the anger that comes from that road rage, and then also the impact that it has on some momentary lapses in judgment with what you are expected to do when involved in those situations. Unhinged essentially takes that concept and that very thing that people can relate to and turns it into something way more extreme than you might ever see, which is why it creates for an entertaining film that I came out really liking. Just so we are perfectly clear here, I by no means think that this is a great movie. As a matter of fact, I can understand where some people come from when they say that it's not a good movie at all. With that being said, that's why there is a thing called a guilty pleasure. And for me, this is a guilty pleasure movie through and through. A movie that I could potentially in the future put on in the background while doing something else, and then tune into a scene that I like if it came on. Guilty pleasure movies have always been a thing for the longest time. And what this movie in particular reminds me of, at least when I was watching it at the time, is one of my other favorite guilty pleasures, which is Unstoppable, starring Chris Pine and Denzel Washington, directed by Tony Scott. It's about a runaway freight train that is barreling through the state of Pennsylvania at high speeds, causing a lot of destruction. The reason I use that movie as a great comparison is that it relies on a concept within real life that could happen, even if, say, the movie takes it to an even bigger extreme that might never happen. Where a movie like that gets off for me is that there's actually some decent direction, and then our main characters and actors in Chris Pine and Denzel Washington sell it enough to where I'm fully entertained and along with them for the ride. And to that point, it doesn't just fully rely on the cheesy concept of it all to sell the film. It very much is a movie that has themes of teamwork, courage, and the humane thing to overcome impossible odds. It is an insanely suspenseful film when showcasing all the action sequences and moments of emotion as you follow these two guys in their efforts to stop something that, quite frankly, no human being should ever be able to do. An underdog story that is something that a lot of people like to see in the kinds of films that they consume, which is why for me I consider it a guilty pleasure. Like Unhinged, it's not a perfect movie. It's got some flaws, but I'm just there for the ride because it's very entertaining in that guilty pleasure way. The great Quentin Tarantino has even said himself before that Unstoppable is one of his favorite films of that decade. Even a legend as him shows that he's got taste, and I don't say that jokingly. But even with all that aside, to get back to the movie that we are talking about today, I can't stress enough that you give it a watch on Netflix while while it is still there. It isn't a perfect movie by any means, as I said with Unstoppable, and it's also got some problems. But sometimes you just let your brain turn off and you just go along for the ride and just see how insane some of the things are that take place within it. Situations and circumstances that, by definition, you might say just conveniently happen, but again, they are done in a way that makes for great entertainment. A lot of the situations that Russell Crowe as the road rager find himself in don't really add up to it really feeling like he should be able to get away with it. Again, it's that idea of convenience in how he's able to do the things he's doing. Things that I won't spoil, but are really torturous in just how he goes about doing it. Hence why I said earlier that his methods of going about those things are just pure terror for our main character Rachel, played by the actress Caren Pistorius, who did a good job with what she was given. Her son Kyle, played by Gabriel Bateman, also did a good job and sold himself well enough to understand the situation he was getting himself into because of what his mom did to upset Russell Crowe's character Tom. But Russell Crowe, man, I mean, this guy is just insane. I've watched enough movies now with Russell Crowe to know that he's by far one of the best actors to ever live. This is a bit of a different role that I've seen him in with regards to the other kinds of characters that he's played. In a lot of other films that people would know him well enough for, he plays it a lot more stoic and heroic. Of course, one of the most famous examples of that is when he played Maximus in Gladiator. And so when you compare how he's able to play two different kinds of people with him in Gladiator, and then when he's here in Unhinged, it just shows he's got range. Again, I won't give anything away, but I really like the opening 5 minutes, where you actually get the introduction to his character. Most of the time, you don't see a lot of movies actually open with the villain, but it explains it perfectly to why he's acting the way he is, in the sense that it's doing the show and don't tell method of storytelling. The guy literally doesn't say a single word, and with just a couple of actions that he does, it shows the kind of person you're dealing with, even if for a second you kind of feel for him. And so right there, you have a setup for wanting to follow him in what he would do after that if he got into another incident, hence where we go with him getting into that road rage incident with Rachel. He felt disrespected by that, and so it basically showed that that was the final straw for him. At that moment, everything that he truly cared about in the world went out the window, and he was going to do whatever he could to make it worse for other people. And so with that is where he really became the villain for the rest of the movie's runtime. But the last thing that I want to speak to within this video is that I just like the fact that this movie is essentially an original concept, even if it's pulling from things that you've seen before. The character of Tom is able to get away with a lot of things that maybe for some is too cliche, in the sense that it's plot armor for his character and how the plot was able to progress in the first place. Whether you like that form of storytelling is another discussion entirely, but I like the fact that his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage, and also the combination of unpredictability and control, is what keeps others at bay. As time goes on, things will eventually catch up to him, but it's his relentlessness, pure dedication to terrorizing this woman and her family, and violence is what allows him to continue wreaking havoc. He is just in a mindset of, I don't give a shit what happens to me. I'm gonna do whatever I can to make other people miserable, and I love that. It's a motivating factor for the watcher to want to keep watching him in his efforts until you get to the end, where again, I won't give anything away, but there is a resolve to where the story ends with his conquest tormenting just one person because that person set him off way more than where he was originally. At the end of the day, aside from the fact that this was an analysis of the film, I do think the main reason I wanted to make it in the first place is because I want to thank Netflix for giving me the ability to see this film and talk about it. I've most certainly got my problems with streaming services and the whole age of streaming that we're living in right now, especially with a service like Netflix. But sometimes you just have to acknowledge that it can do good on streaming to allow people to come across something that they didn't think they'd like, and yet it becomes a favorite of theirs to watch again in the future. So there you have it. That's my commentary on the movie Unhinged. What do you all think? Leave your comments down below and let's have a nice and respectful conversation about it. I can't stress enough that you be reasonable with me if you disagree with the point I made. Thank you all for stopping by my channel. If you want to see more moving forward from me with regards to film and television and you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you are new here and turn on that notification bell. I'm trying to build a community on here and your support would be greatly appreciated. That's a wrap, folks. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day and I will see you all soon for the next video.